Welcome back to part 2 of my Big Brute restoration project. Let's, in this video, look at how we turned 2 dirty trucks into a big messy pile of parts on my work table. Let's dig in, shall we? Well, here's the first snafu. I don't know what the deal is, but these nuts and bolts that hold the body mount to the shock tower, they're ridiculously tight. I've gotten one off so far, but I don't know if they put red Loctite on these or what the deal is. There's no need for these nuts to be that tight. So as the parts are stripped off from both trucks, I'm just tossing them all in this container, and then I'll wash them with simple green soap and water at the laundry sink. The hardware, for now, everything is going to get put into this little magnetic parts bin, and then I'll spray them down with some ballistol. It's an amazing oil, ballistol, and clean all those up with maybe some light steel wool, get any corrosion off of them. I'll do the same with the shafts that hold the suspension arms on, the pins, hinge pins, if you will. And once I have all the hardware off, then I got a parts container over there at the end of the table. I'll actually measure each and every screw and sort them by size, sort them by type. All right, it's not incredibly intriguing, but here's the solution to getting those nuts off of those screws, and that is just vice grips. I have, as many of you probably do, multiple little old school box wrenches. I keep them in my race kit just because sometimes they fit whatever I'm doing at trackside, but I can't get enough leverage using this little wrench, so it's vice grips and a screwdriver, and going slow and easy, because that's so tight that if I don't hold the screwdriver straight and apply easy or consistent pressure, it's going to slip and I'm going to ruin the screw. So just a little bit at a time. It makes no sense for it to be this tight. It's literally got to be red Loctite. So I got the last nut off. There was no sign of it being cross-threaded. So I don't know what the deal is, but of all the parts on the truck to apply Loctite to, this one would be one of the last that I would apply Loctite to. You see, as I get close to the end here, it's really starting to turn normally. So I just locked the vice grips on there, supported it, and we're good to go. The key is use the right size bit screwdriver. I think this is a number 2. Who knows? Maybe a number 2 Phillips. The key is to use the right size screwdriver so you don't slip and destroy the head of the screw. All right, I want to point out a couple of things on this Big Boss gearbox here. And it's something that I was guilty of back in the day, and that is over tightening screws. So we look here, that must be where that little piece of plastic goes that I found that was in the bottom of that parts container. You can see there that your screw would go in from this side and be inserted into the other half. These are usually called clamshells, right? They go together. And so yeah, if you over tighten these screws, that's the kind of thing that can happen. I used to do that as a kid. I've done that on pretty much all of my RCs when I was a kid. Here's another example of over tightening here. This screw hole here is where the gear cover goes on. Let me just grab one. So what we have here is the motor would mount on the other side, the other half of the gearbox, and you would use these screw holes and this slot to adjust your gear mesh. So you could put one screw on this side and then one screw on this side, and as your pinion got bigger, you would slide the electric motor away from your idler gear in here. All right, so there's the idler gear. One screw would go there, another screw would go here, and you could slide back and forth to adjust your gear mesh. This is the cover that goes on there. See, there's a little locator dowel right there. So you put that on there like that, and then you tighten those screws down. Now, whoever built this truck was probably like me, and they probably ran it outside in mud and in snow, and they wanted to keep things kind of, as watertight as possible, which is what would attribute to this being cracked. They just over tightened that screw to keep this cover on, to keep slop out of the gearbox. There is way more leftover grease in here than there needs to be. Something else I was also guilty of as a kid. If a little grease is good, then a lot of grease must be better, right? Nope. Drag, friction. It actually produces friction when you have too much, which is going to heat up your motor, which is going to kill your brush motor, which is going to kill your runtime. When I rebuild these, it's just getting a couple of drops of grease on each gear. Nothing like this. This is silly. So the guy I got this truck from, he said one had a broken chassis. It's just the front end of the chassis, the front bulkhead. And he said there was something wrong with the drivetrain, gearbox, whatever on the other side. I haven't found anything specific yet, but as I reassemble, that's really when I will be able to inspect all the parts, because they'll all be clean. They also need bearings, so I got to order a couple sets of bearings, probably Fast Eddie, either from Fast Eddie or off eBay. Who knows? We'll see. But anyway, we're moving forward. We're finding little things as we go. Oh, something else. I ran my Big Brute to the point where these became incredibly sloppy. Now, there's some slop in this top one, and it's right there where the top hinge pin, that slop is actually just in this half of the gearbox. There's nothing you can do about that. I mean, maybe there is, but the bottom one, there's no play. Well, yeah, there's still a little bit of play, but nothing to speak of. But man, my Big Brute back in the day, those hinge pins were looser than my prom date's morals. Like, it was just so sloppy. So, yeah, we're going to carry on. So here's something else I want to take a second to show, and that is the dog bones. Now, these dog bones wore out to the point where those four, I don't know what to call them, flanges, they would wear so thin. You can see here, there's lots and lots of meat left up on the edge here, but these things wear out to the point where they completely just disintegrate. I remember that as well from back in the day. This is a crazy stroll down memory lane. You gotta remember, like, I had my truck in 1988, Later got a job working at a hobby shop in 91 or something like that. And I don't even remember whatever happened to it. I don't know who I sold it to, where it went, no idea. No idea whatsoever. Of course, I don't remember what I had for breakfast. So, but as I'm working on the truck, I'm getting all these flashbacks of the parts and things that I remember specifically about them. Now, the good news, these can be 3D printed. Now, I'm not a big fan of 3D printed stuff. It's normally crap because you just can't replace molded resins and polymers with 3D printing. Not yet. But if, you know, if I needed dog bones just to at least have a complete truck on the shelf, or if those dog bones wore out quickly, so what? You can always print more, right? So that's kind of a cool thing that we have available for these trucks, because there's not a lot of these left in the wild, I don't imagine, because of how many people need them, because of how quickly they wore out. One of the causes of them wearing out was just they were completely open to the elements. So you get sand in there in between the dog bone and the axle and the out drive from the diff. Yeah, those plastic parts aren't going to stand a chance. They're literally being sanded down by driving your vehicle through the sand. Some people probably also put some grease in there. What does grease do? It tracks and holds dirt, which again makes the wear of this part premature. All right, here's something else to discuss, and also something else that we can thankfully get 3D printed, and that is hubs. These hubs cracked. They cracked from over tightening the wheel on the axle, and this one does have a hairline crack in it. I'll put some glue in the back of it. I've also seen with other hubs like this, nylon tie wrap around the outside to hold them together. I'm not sure how long it holds up, but again, if it's just a question of a shelf queen, whatever. So, and these hubs, they're just pressed onto a pin that goes through the axle. There we go. So there's the groove for the pin. It's cracked up here. I'll clean that up and add a little bit of glue. Thankfully, these can also be 3D printed. I've got four 3D printers. Not a clue how to use them. They're still in the boxes. So I guess this will be a great opportunity to motivate me to learn how to 3D print. Now, I'm not sure if we can see here, but that pin, that should do it. The pin is actually bowed down. It's actually bent. It's bowed like this. Another clear indication that this wheel was over tightened. So imagine to bend that steel pin, how tight that nut was. That's why the hubs crack. Well, this is a pleasant surprise. Someone upgraded this truck with ball bearings. The original Kyosho Big Brute came with plastic bushings, and they were absolute junk. Like, it was a way to save money, I guess, but they wore out so fast. The truck rattled more than a 1911. It was just ridiculous. So nice to see some ball bearings on here. Are they salvageable? Don't know. We'll find out. That's what happened. Okay, well, there we have it. that is an outdrive for the transmission that was removed from that truck up there on the toolbox. I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between stripping them apart. So he mentioned that there was a problem with the transmission. Well, there's the problem. That outdrive is supposed to have a gear on it right where my fingernail is, and it's obviously been snapped off. So that's fine. I planned on upgrading to Thorpe anyway. Back in the day, I had a set of Thorpe axles, outdrives, and dog bones. The Thorpe axle that I used, though, had a pin in it, just like the Kyosho axle. And just a small jump, nothing crazy. It snapped right where the hole was in the axle for the pin. They upgraded later to a solid axle and a clamp-on hub. So there was no hole in the axle that the hub would slide onto and then press against a pin like I showed you earlier in the video. So hopefully all that is still available on eBay. I'm sure it's going to be 10 times the price it was retail back in the 80s, but that really is the answer. To get rid of these plastic outdrives, get rid of these plastic dog bones, and get rid of the axle with the hole in it and move to a clamping hub. And that is the way that my truck that is going to run will go. One will be on the shelf here with my other vintage shelf queens, and the running one, that's the one that's going to get the Thorpe stuff. All right, I want to show you guys just how filthy this thing is before I reassemble it clean. Like, it is just caked in here. I thought that the video was running and I pulled out so much grease from around the outdrive. So what happens is, I don't know if they sprayed this down with something that they thought was going to act as a lubricant, but all it does is hold the dirt onto the plastic parts, and that's just going to cause your plastic parts to wear out prematurely. Like, this thing is just greasier than my first boss. All right, time to get them cleaned up. All right, so let's look at the front of one of these two. You can see here, gobs of glue. So this whole front end is broken off at one time. And then this is bad. The bumper's completely tore off from the front bulkhead. I can glue these little bits back on there, so if I need parts just for a shelf queen truck, that'll be the part that gets repaired and then just put on the shelf. Up here, again, very typical. That's probably glued on there as opposed to rebuilding this section. And here he's even got some kind of small wood screw. So I imagine that there was something glued on the inside here maybe, and then he put this screw here to hold the front end to the chassis. What surprises will we find? Oh, the good old days. FP 148, old school servo saver. Look at that. That was what protected your servo gears and made your steering feel like crap. I might continue to use this simply because it's how you attach the steering to the rack. But I will tie wrap this. I'll put a nylon tie wrapper on that to tighten that up. And of course, this is going to go in the trash, and I'll use a proper high torque servo with metal gears. All right. So this is how far I've brought one of them so far. Let's see what kind of mess we've got here with this broken bulkhead. I'll start by taking off the bumper. There's only the screws on this side holding it on. The other side is broken. So let's see what we got once we get it off, see how broken it is. I'm going to take those broken plastic parts and put them in the parts container here to my left so they don't get lost. And then when I wash everything, I'll go ahead and glue them back on. I don't plan on bashing these too hard. So even in some cases, the parts that I glue will be okay. It looks like this one possibly has already been glued. I got a container of soapy water in the ground. As I disassemble the truck, I'm dropping the parts in to soak in that soapy water. So I just dip my toothbrush in there, kind of clean this up a little bit. Can't really tell if that one right there, I can't really tell if that has remnants of crazy glue on it or not. But these two pieces, right, come on, there we go. So you can see the two broken pieces there and there. They came off the bulkhead. I'm going to remove those screws and put them aside, glue them later. These are interesting. These steering stops. I guess that a long screw with a brass tube hits on the lower A arm, lower front suspension arm, so you don't oversteer maybe. Not worried about that. Those will be removed. This one's really bent. I'll be using modern radio components, endpoint adjustments, so I can ensure that I won't overdrive my servos. You know, if you turn your wheel all the way, the steering on your remote, you turn all the way and you hear a buzz, you're slowly killing your servo. You got to go into your radio's programming and adjust the endpoints to reduce the travel so that you get full lock but don't overdrive the servo and cook it. Back in the day we didn't have those options. It's interesting. I'll leave that on there. The screw's bent pretty bad. So a servo wouldn't have been powerful enough to bend that screw back in the day. That probably happened just from bashing and smashing in this stuff. We're getting down to the nitty gritty here. I'll probably time lapse some of this till we get to the real interesting part of trying to remove that front bulkhead from the chassis. Nothing left but the chassis and the front bulkhead and the bulkhead braces. I'm going to start by taking the screws off that hold the two halves together. Normally you would assemble the two halves and then bolt it to the chassis, but since this thing is screwed in from so many different ways, I'm going to start with all the original factory screw locations and then try and find a Robertson screwdriver small enough to get to those small Robertsons in here and the one that's at the front here. I know these are on eBay. Of course, everything on eBay is stupid expensive. Hopefully I can replace this front bulkhead, and it's just the bulkhead, not the chassis. It's drilled through the front of these, but you can't tell, and I don't think it's going to affect the structural integrity of the part. for the top ones. Okay, that one's not crazy glued in or anything, so that's good. It's a possibility that the top of the bulkhead can be repaired. Another common way, or another common occurrence, another leading cause, another thing that resulted in these breaking off was running the truck without the top chassis cover. It wasn't decorative, it was functional. It added structural integrity to the chassis. It also helped keep this bulkhead on. You had two screws that went through here into here and supported it. So if you drove your truck without this, you could crack your chassis, especially if you didn't have your speed control servo tray mount on. It was not good to drive the truck without that top mount. Not top mount rather, but top chassis cover, I guess. So this one came out okay. This one is covered in glue. I don't know what kind of glue this is. It looks like glue gun glue, but maybe not. Glue gun glue is very rubbery. This is kind of brittle and chipping off. Yeah, I'm not sure. Not sure what it is. Oh, interesting. It's almost like some kind of liquid plastic. I wouldn't call it JB Weld, because JB Weld dries very hard and you can actually sand it. I don't think it's JB Weld, but to be honest, I don't have a lot of experience with JB Weld. But ultimately, I was able to chip it away, peel it back to get access to those screws. Okay, well, there we go. So these little wood screws did absolutely nothing to hold things together. All they did was F up the parts. There's a little locator pin onto these. Goes in the bottom of the chassis. This one is broken off. I can fix that. It won't have any strength, but at least it'll be back on where it's supposed to be. Yeah, so I see what he was doing here. You can see the holes that correspond to these little wood screws that he's got jammed in here. The idea was that they would go into the front bulkhead like that, but they just simply were not long enough. So they didn't do anything except put holes and stuff. Now, if there was a way to put them on first, and they're probably, I don't know, I'll have to see when I go back and reassemble. But you see, they didn't even go all the way through. If it was me, I'd use one bolt and a nut, go all the way through this support, through the back of the bulkhead with the nut, and bolt these to that. The idea is you would then attach the bulkhead to the chassis by attaching it to that support. But it's a hot mess. I mean, look, this piece right here that I'm touching, yeah, that goes on the other part, the other bulkhead. It's broken off. So we got the holes at the top of the bulkhead broken. Looks like try to put another smaller screw in here once upon a time. And then where's the other half? Right here. Yeah, this belongs here. That belongs on there like that. I might be able to repair that too. glue it, and then do something on the inside, maybe support it. Pretty trashed. Salvageable. I can make it work for a shelf queen, but not for running around outside. So here you can see that screws that were longer than necessary were used and poked right through and made that hole. That little plastic nub, that's just stretched out plastic. This one on this side's gone completely. So somebody used screws that were too long in these holes. But that's the worst of it so far. So far we got this broken bulkhead and a broken outdrive. So as I mentioned earlier, I soak the parts in here, soapy water, sometimes soapy water and simple green, right? And I've emptied that water a couple of times now, at least 3 times, because I don't get the job done. I go away, do something else, come back, the water's cold, so I dump out the old water and then add more hot water and fresh soap. Well, this time I decided, since there's only a few parts left, to dump it through the strainer. So look at what is left in that water after already dumping it out 3 times. And this is sand, almost exclusively sand, and it's held together with like whatever kind of grease that the previous owner was using on the truck. And so it's literally like attaching sandpaper to your vehicle, and you can well imagine running plastic parts on sandpaper after a while what happens. So you know, go easy on the lube if you were playing in sand. All right, now that the parts have been cleaned and dried, the next step will be to organize them into these bins. So I'll put all the shock towers in one section, all the arms in one section, etc., etc. And I will not necessarily inspect them while doing this, unless it's something major, like, you know, this broken front end. We already know from disassembly that this front end is a hot mess. So that kind of sorts itself out. The rest of the stuff, after I've sorted it, then when I reassemble, I'll pick the best parts and build one truck out of the best parts, and the other truck will be the truck out of the worn out parts. Then I got to decide, do I want to drive the worn out truck, or do I want to put the worn out truck on the shelf? Typically, your shelf queen or your safe queen is your cleanest, nicest thing that you want to keep that way. But I want a runner, and do I want a runner that's made out of parts that are about to break and let go? I don't know. So I gotta put a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Runner out of best parts or shelf queen out of best parts. And then this mess here. So what I've got going on for all of the hardware is these little containers here. Those are all servo containers, the boxes that servos came into. I'm going to literally put every item in its own container, meaning all the washers will go in one container, the brass parts will go in one container, the self-tapping screws will go in one container. Later on, they'll be sorted by length. The metric hardware will go in one container. All the nuts will go in one container. And once they're in that container, I'll spray them down with WD-40. I've got a container around here somewhere with all the hinge pins and some other metal parts that were initially into the bath. As I took them out of the bath and scrubbed them down with a Scotch-Brite, then I put them in WD-40 until I got back to them later so that they wouldn't rust after being wet. So that's the plan for that hardware. Separate it all in its individual containers, spray it down, and then clean it with a toothbrush and WD-40 and sort it into its hardware family, if you will. So that's it for now for the cleaning video. Part 3 will be the parts inspection and maybe some repair. For example, I have a plan for how to make these look less chewed up. As you can see, they are just chewed to snot, and the reason for that is because these things that muck that I showed you during the cleaning was all around the outdrive. You can even see the wear here on the side of the case. Not sure if that's focusing. See that dull spot in the plastic? Well, that's like someone took a Dremel and just chewed into the plastic. And the reed, you can see it on that side too. See that dull spot right there by my finger? That should not be like that. But whatever kind of grease the person who ran this truck with last, whatever kind of grease they used, just caked in between the outdrive and the side of the gearbox. And it held sand. And then that sand acted like sandpaper and wore away at these plastic parts. So I'll show you how I'm going to get rid of all those lines in a later video. But thanks for watching for now, guys. Please like and subscribe, and come back for more vintage Kyosho monster truck restoration.